In 1975, I was struck by lightning while talking on the telephone. And this whole spiritual search and this whole business about spiritual reality, I come from South Carolina. Everybody goes to hell where I come from. There is no question that if you were born in sin and you were in the South, those fundamentalists are going to make sure that you're afraid of Jesus and you're going to go to hell.
That's why I'm moving to North Carolina.
That's even worse. That is hell. So in 1975, when I got struck by lightning, what happened in my changing perspective of time was this. What I never believed in, had no idea, no focal point, no paradigm to understand it by. A near-death experience. One day I never believed in any of this stuff. The next day I was dead. And the day after that, I became everything I never believed in. And my last 30 years has been an internal search to not if it's true, but how it works. Not whether there's a life after death, but what are the mechanisms and its purpose. Not whether there is eternal life, but the direction and intent of eternal life. Not whether there is a divine architect, or there are angels or beings of great power, presence, and potential. But who are they? Everybody in this room knows that time is changing. It is moving faster. A day goes by faster now than ever. You never have enough time. It's not that the 24 hours has changed. It's consciousness is changing. This is occurring, whether you like it or not. It's occurring because of cosmic potential and possibilities, but also the development of technology and integrated technology. You can instantly be anywhere in the world on a computer. You can roam cyberspace. So all of a sudden, the fact that that is possible, time has changed. Because what you can put into the time that you are perceiving is a vast, greater proponent of knowledge. Next, time is changing. We don't even live in the same universe we lived in last year. We don't live in the same universe. The world as we know it has passed away. We live in a new solar system. All of a sudden, guys, everything that you've ever heard or really thought about the universe is changed.
The Mayans' advanced knowledge of astrology and mathematics enabled them to create a system of calendars that are more precise than our current Gregorian calendar. On December 21st, 2012, the Earth and Sun are aligned with the center of the Milky Way galaxy, an event that only occurs once every 26,000 years. On that day, we go into what's called the precession of the equinoxes, which is also an event that occurs only once every 26,000 years. To this day, the Mayan calendar can predict every lunar eclipse within 30 seconds. The Tzolk'in, Hab, and long count calendars are the most prevalent Mayan calendars. The Tzolk'in refers to a cycle of 260 days, which coincidentally is the estimated time of human gestation. The 260-day period also correlates with the time in between harvesting and gathering maize in particular levels of the Mayan highlands. This calendar was widely used astrologically as an almanac, tracking cycles of various astronomical bodies and their influences on terrestrial climates and seasons. However, the Mayans considered this calendar a universal periodic table of the harmonics of time-space.
The holy books speak of the Mayas' original homeland Mu, or Aztlan, a city which sank beneath the waves during a great cataclysm. They also mention angry and vengeful gods who actually created the Maya and Toltec forebearers, forming them Adam-like out of the earth in order that they might serve their master gods. They speak of the decline of intelligence, the denigration of the spiritual constitution of mortals. Due to the brutal systematic conquest of the Maya, Toltec, Incas, and Aztecs by the glorious Spanish crown, there is precious little in the way of written information to help modern researchers know exactly who these tribes and nations were and what their beliefs were actually based upon.
We actually have two data sets that we maintain. It's interesting about the two dates. Let's examine the latter date first. December 21, 2012 at 11:11 a.m., not p.m., is the alignment that was deliberately created by Pope Gregory under the auspices or under the direction of the powers that be at that time. They took a German mathematician of some note who assembled a team, and then they used texts that theoretically do not exist. This is to say, many of the Mayan books that were said to have been burned, in fact, were not burned, and they were carefully crated up and taken back to the Vatican as part of the payoff for the expeditions and the slicing of the planet between the Spanish and the Portuguese by the popes of that time. Now, when Pope Gregory had the calendar redone, they went to considerable work. That is to say, a team of 15 mathematicians, led by this particular German mathematician, spent some 5 months in the reconciliation level alone to get the Gregorian calendar to align specifically with the end of the Mayan calendar on these particular numbers. So they did it from a numerological viewpoint. They wanted the 11:11 a.m. because 11 is the number of mastery. It is one number beyond divinity. And the 11:11 combination brings you to 22, which is their number for sainthood or ascension. And then the whole December 12, 2012, if you start looking at the numerological values that are inherent within that, you see that it continually points back to the broken cross, or the what's known as the swastika. This swastika has been tainted by the use by Hitler et al., but in fact it's a very meaningful symbol that derives extremely ancient. I mean, even the Jain, who go back millions of years, found that symbol handed to them as opposed to discovering it. And here's what it really means. If you look down on a swastika and the idea of a broken cross, it's both the double cross indicating the four-sided pyramid, or five-sided counting the bottom, but it also, in this particular instance, represents a solar effect. This solar effect can be seen from the sun or from outside the earth, but we can't really see it from here. But there are these four streams of activity that go from the magnetic field of the Earth up to the Sun, and because of the rotation of both the Sun and the Earth, these streams are not held as continuous straight lines, but in fact bend and twist. Now, they don't really twist like a spiral in a candy or something. They just twist at this one particular point, and so from an outside view, they form the swastika. So the swastika is actually encoded in the way in which the 2012 date was worked out. It was encoded as a reference to solar activity that they understand will occur at that time. And the thinking at the time from the Gregorian calendar, Pope Gregory et al., relates entirely to these hidden level Mayan books that I believe the Vatican still possesses, which go to great detail, according to references I've read about those things that were theoretically burned. These went to some great detail as to the solar stuff that was going to occur. Now, I actually am of the opinion that Kalaman is much more correct than people would give him credence for, but that nonetheless, the actual end date of the calendar is the 2012 date, the end date of the long count. It may not be as meaningful as Kalaman's date, though, because Kalaman is actually working on a different view of the conjunction of the calendars, and he's discussing the beginning of the end rather than the end of the end, if we want to look at it that way. So his is much more pertinent to us because it is the point at which we would take that step. Now, as I referred to earlier, from a 0-0 class civilization into a class 1 civilization, that will be the opportune moment, that will be the Kyrios, the quality of time will favor humans doing something magnificent in October of 2011 onward.
Let's talk about what's going to happen at the end of the Mayan calendar. And then we will kind of backtrack a little bit and go into what's happening right now in our immediate future. Okay? What happens? What happens on the Mayan calendar, October 28th, 2011, is absolutely everything, all at the same time. There's an acceleration of more and more of creation available in every moment. You got that? More and more of everything available in every moment. We've already looked at the past and saw all of the different, up to this point, it's all still available. And more is becoming available in every single moment. What happens, finally, is the acceleration gets so great that absolutely everything, which is infinitely possible, all happens at exactly the same time. Which is the truth in the first place. Consciousness or creation exists in total, all past, all future, all exist right now.
As all of this gestalt, the ultimate meaning of why we're pursuing these investigations, came to a critical mass, one number kind of floated up, and I don't mean 19.5. That was the number 2012. Because the more we delved into the geometry that we found at Cydonia, and the connections to sacred sites here on this planet, and the traditions of ancient wisdom keepers, like the Maya, like the Hopi in the American tradition, like the Celts in the European tradition, like the Egyptians, like the Polynesians, the more we see extraordinary common threads, which on the one hand are told as stories to preserve the narrative, preserve the spine of information. And on the other hand, they're told in terms of the numbers. If you start reading sacred traditions, it doesn't matter whether they're the Vedic, whether they're the Mayan, or the Egyptian, you wind up looking at the same sets of numbers. over and over again. And it becomes very obvious as you get into this over years and even decades that those numbers are the key essentials, and the stories which entrain and transmit the numbers are essentially the carrier wave. They're the mechanism whereby peoples all over this planet, indigenous peoples, native peoples, transmigrational peoples, have preserved the essence of these numbers because there is information in those numbers, and the information is important both to our past and, more relevant, they're important to our future.
There is a cosmic event occurring that's causing 24 hours to be not enough time. You know more, you're more aware, you have more feelings, you realize more things. So it's not really time changing, it's you. Because of a cosmic flow of energy that's moving through this universe that can be measured scientifically. Because we sit at the end of a 26,000-year cycle called the precession of the equinox. Our little galaxy, this 1.1 billion planets and stars called the Milky Way, has now traveled 26,000 years to circle what we call the signs of the zodiacs, but through each of the 12 constellations that we now know to be our particular part of the universe.
It almost seems like this galactic alignment, which of course targets the years around 2012, was known to the oldest civilizations in Vedic India and in Egypt, and they believed that these kinds of alignments to the center of the galaxy stimulate transformation on the planet.
And if you do a geological study, doing core drillings into Earth, you realize that this has occurred. You realize that this has occurred many, 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 many times in the Earth's past. Roughly every 26,000 years. Scientifically proven.
Other civilizations, indigenous civilizations, had different kinds of calendars. Hardly any of them, especially the central calendars of civilizations, had to do with this orbit. The archaeologists who have studied ancient civilizations have found that there are many, many calendars, most of them having 360 days. The Tibetan calendar, the Chinese calendar, the Maori calendar, the Celtic calendar, the Hebrew calendar have 360 days. Not 365 and 1/4 days. Of course, we've been taught by our educational institutions that those poor primitive people just didn't have it. They just had an approximate solar year that they counted. And they were just too dumb to know the truth. Excuse me, but we're going to stand that on its head today.
Almost universally, the ancient calendars point to this decade, to this time in history, as being unique not only in human history, as we have known it for the last 200,000 years or so, to Earth history, to geologic history as well. Almost universally, the calendars, Chinese calendars, Tibetan calendars, the Mayan calendars, the Egyptian calendars, that were developed thousands of years ago end in these days. They end in this time, and they all point to now as being a time that is very unique in history.
But the Hopis think that too. The mythology of the people in Mongolia think that too. The tribes on Boa Boa think that too. African nations that's been around thousands of years think that too. The Aborigines think that too. So now we have a changing face of time where multicultures unrelated to each other, believe the same thing is happening in their mythology. But it also happens to be the end of a 26,000-year cycle, the end of the Piscean Age and the dawn of the Aquarian Age. That mythological story we've always heard in spirituality is now scientifically a reality.
We haven't understood time. Time is of the mind, time is of the spirit. Space is physical. You know, we can see it, we can look at it, we can touch it, we can taste it, we can smell it, we can feel it. But time is of the mind. We haven't explored time. Time is where we're going. Time is where we are. And at the center of time is that timelessness you're talking about. We all want to experience that. We want to have that as the central program of our society. But we're not going to get there until we change the time. So we either change the time or the time changes us. The time is changing us very rapidly right now.
You can be anywhere, anytime, everywhere, all the time, by the time we get here. To try to explain what that would be like is pretty well impossible. We just don't have the words or the consciousness yet to grasp that.
There's a lot of strange things are happening with my work, too, as a hypnotist. So I just want to say a few things before I get into this part. You probably know I do past life regression, past life therapy. I've been doing it for 40 years, 30 years consistently, and 20 years as a UFO investigator. I work in the deepest possible level of trance, the somnambulistic level. A lot of my hypnotists say they won't work there. They're afraid to work there. They said strange things happen there. See, we are getting ready. We're in the middle of it now. It's happening now. We are moving into a new dimension. The entire world is shifting into a new dimension, a new frequency. I think I've talked before to either here or in other groups about their dimensions all around us. We just can't see them. They're all vibrating at different frequencies. But the most important thing of all, especially right now, is to get rid of all this old karma. We're going to go into something that's very important. We're going into a new world, a new earth. You can't drag this karma with you. The new earth is going to be beautiful and perfect and positive. There's no room for negative karma. You've got to get rid of it. And that's when I'm working with my clients, we discuss these things. What is the quickest but not the easiest way to get rid of karma? Do you know? Some people say, do it back to them. That doesn't do anything but keep perpetuating. Forgive. You have to forgive. You got to let it go. Very, very difficult. Very, very hard. How many of you know Annie Kirkwood? We were talking about the new earth, and she said she had this vision of the earth as a solid ball. Then she saw it begin to separate and move apart the way a cell does when it begins to separate and reproduce, pulling apart like a cell until it broke apart into two earths. Over here, she heard them saying, "We did it, we did it, we did it." Over here, she heard them say, "Poor thing, she died," believing all of that. So see, the one will not be aware of the other. And that's what they mean by those left behind, will not even be aware that anything has happened. The old earth is still there, vibrating at this lower frequency with all these terrible things happening to it, but the other earth moves into the new dimensions, vibrating so fast it becomes invisible. So they are not aware anything has ever happened.
Everything in existence has a natural vibration to it, from our atoms all the way to the vastness of the universe. To show a simple connection between the earth and our bodies, take a look at our body's harmonic focal points, better known as our chakras. Just as there are harmonic focal points on the guitar string, there are locations within our body where our vibrations culminate. In Eastern philosophies, these 7 chakras are used to bring health and balance to the physical and spiritual body. Our Earth also has 7 chakra points at equally distant locations from one another. There is 1 chakra point on each continent. The root chakra is in Mount Shasta, California. The sexual chakra is in the Isle of Sun, Lake Titicaca in South America. The solar plexus chakra is in Uluru Kata Juta in Australia. The heart chakra is in Glastonbury or Shaftesbury, England. The throat chakra is where the Great Pyramids of Giza in Egypt are. The heart chakra is at Kuhe Malak Sia in Iran. And the crown chakra is at Mount Kailas in Tibet. Scientifically, this is explained because at the core of our Earth, there is a molten iron crystal that resonates at approximately 7 Hertz. There are energy vortexes all over the Earth where electromagnetic energy emanates. There are also several vile vortices surrounding the equator where strange anomalies occur, such as radio and compass malfunctions, as well as plane and ship disappearances. You may have heard of a few of these.
What do you think happens when a UFO crashes in World War II and the people who financed Nazi Germany, once it collapsed, they're looking for as much technology, as much goodies as they can get their hands on. So what do you think they're going to do when these UFOs crash? They're going to want to rip out everything from those UFOs imaginable and reverse engineer it and make it into something they can use. So what's the first thing that they go for? They take out the chair. Because these UFOs, you're sitting there in the chair and you say you want to go somewhere, you meditate on it, and a vortex opens up in front of the ship and you fly through it and you pop through a wormhole and you end up somewhere else. Okay? So that's what the chair does. The chair is the interface with your consciousness. So when you understand that your consciousness is interfacing through the chair, that helps you get to a point in yourself where you can see that the chair is a psychic amplifier. That's what it does. The chair's function is that it takes your natural innate psychic function and makes it vastly more powerful. They could actually create a wormhole with the chair, with the psychics exercising their consciousness in the chair. They had help from, apparently, ETs from Sirius in designing the chair. And the chair allowed them to send people through time. There were multiple wavelengths that the chair cranked out on graph paper, okay? Some of those wavelengths were corresponding to a natural 20-year harmonic in the Earth's vibration. And that 20-year harmonic, as it turns out, if people were moving through time, which is one of the things they found they could do, is send people through time, this wave would tell you exactly where you were in time, depending on where up and down it was. So what they found that was so bizarre was that at December 21st, 2012, they could calculate it down to the day, that's how precise this was, that for some reason all the graphs, all the waves would go into a complete flat line. They no longer moved up and down like before. They went flat for like 7 or 8 seconds. So then they're asking the guys that went through these stargates and were traveling into the future, what happened to you? Every single time that somebody tried to hit 2012, they said the same thing. There was this thing they called the bump. It actually hits you like a bump. You actually feel like you've slammed into something. And as soon as it slams into you, you have the most incredible religious experience you can imagine. Cosmic consciousness. Your consciousness just blasts into this wonderful place where you have awareness of no space, no time. All knowledge is available to you. Ecstatic God consciousness. You could be the galaxy. You could be a subatomic particle. You can go everywhere, do everything, and there's no sense of it ever ending. So when it finally stops, you just can't even believe that you're back to who you were before.
Like what happened to Jodie Foster?
Exactly what happens to Jodie Foster in Contact. So,
Is that the moment of no time then?
That's the zero time, yeah.
Within our modern culture, the 20th century idiom, our scientists are seeing events, unprecedented events, events that we have no reference points for at all, unfold before our eyes. We're seeing them on our Earth. We're seeing them far out beyond our Earth into interstellar space that surrounds our Earth. In the center of our Milky Way, the great central sun, as the ancients called it, there is a mysterious radiant source of information. Well, in 1991, scientists began to notice a new frequency, a new wavelength, a new band of light radiating, triggering from the center of this Milky Way, bathing the stars and the suns and the planets in a new light that had never been experienced before. What does this light mean? Why did it happen, and why is it happening now?
So when these planetary changes are happening, that's like the temperature's going up, and you're actually seeing it as a physical temperature increase, not just on the Earth, but through the whole solar system, okay? However, when we meditate, we're basically taking that raw energy that's turning into heat, which makes people angry. They get heated up, they get hot under the collar, they get red, they see red. All these colors and all these temperatures associated with what's actually an energetic frequency, right? When you meditate, when you chill out, when you play it cool, all these other metaphors of cooling it down, chill out, you're actually processing other people's energy. You're processing other people's karma. You do your own work, and you take some of the burden off of everyone else. So we're actually healing the Earth, we're healing each other, and it has a direct radiant effect on the universe around us. And that is the most powerful thing. If people learned that they could sit at home and pay nothing and simply do their process and get in touch with their creative spark and become the creator by creating and enjoy yourself and get your passion, follow your bliss,
right,
you are healing the world. And of course you should also couple that with physical activism, going out and doing something, even if it's just donating money of some kind. But get out there, make a difference, and it has a frequency consciousness effect that is very tangible and very real. And I know you believe that, and I know you believe that.
Well, there's an interesting phenomenon that's happening now in that our sun is cooling. It's actually cooling down, another part of the phenomenon that the Ulysses craft is investigating. And while the sun is cooling, the planets, and especially the planets in the outer reaches of our solar system, are heating up. There is a heat that is coming from an internal source that is not well understood in the past. In these planets, the mystery is, where's that heat coming from? Why are these planets heating up now? If it's not coming from the radiant heat of the sun, what is generating the heat within these planets?
There have been seasonal climate changes in the past, that is true, but the amount of climate change that we're seeing now and the speed with which it's changing is unlike any other documented part of history. And one of the areas of research that I'm particularly proud of is when I worked with Richard C. Hoagland and combined together well over 100 different references from mainstream scientific sources like NASA, showing that in fact our entire solar system is experiencing climate change. It's not just the Earth. The Sun, for example, is having a greater sudden surge in its level of activity than we've seen basically in 11,000 years. And you can basically tick off every planet except Mercury. We haven't found a whole lot for Mercury. But every other planet besides Mercury, and in many cases several of the moons on those planets, if they have them, are showing really remarkable climate change.
One additional phenomenon that I'd like to speak about as we're moving into this information is something called the photon belt. There's a lot of information, a lot of books out now, and people are talking about the photon belt, what it means to us, what it means to our lives as we're witnessing this this phenomenon for which we have no reference point. We've never seen this happen before. Essentially what the photon belt is, in 1961, an astronomer named Robert Stanley began to detect particles of light, increased numbers of these particles in the atmosphere of the Earth. They were called photons. And they've been measured since 1961, and they have continued to increase in density. So what's happening is we are moving into a band, if you will, of greater and greater density, greater and greater particles of light. Well, researchers now know that this band is a band that our solar system runs into, or actually passes through, once about every 26 to 27,000 years, somewhere right around in there, depending on which calendars we're looking at. And that it takes our solar system about 2,000 years for us to pass from one edge to the other of this band. And at the 1,000 year point, we are in the center of the band, the densest portion of the light that this band, that this photon belt has to offer.
The idea that an energy change in the solar system does not simply refer to an increase in the heat level of the planets or the brightness of the planets or the magnetic field strength, etc., which is the kind of changes that I'm describing in each planet. And if consciousness and energy are interconnected, then quid pro quo, a change in the solar system also refers to a change in consciousness.
When one examines the I Ching, the King Wen sequence, what is immediately apparent after only a few minutes of inspection is that it is not simply 64 hexagrams in some random association, but rather that the hexagrams occur in pairs. The second term of each pair is the inversion of the previous hexagram. What this is essentially an energy structure drawn out of a mathematical analysis of the King Wen sequence. Here is the fractal pattern that is typical of the entire wave. It happens to show up at certain levels. And the notion is that throughout the wave, when it is moving downward, novelty, density of connection is increasing. So the general conclusion from these screens is that novelty is being increased and conserved as we move through time. Now, for instance, in this screen, which is further closure with today, we see 562 million years, virtually the entire career of higher life forms on the planet. 8,500 years on the screen. The great Proto-Egyptian civilizations, Sumer, Chaldea, are strung out like pearls along this plunge. Egypt culminates that ancient hierarchical form of dominator society. Mycenaean pirates plunder Minoan Crete at this point. Here we have the Periclean age in Athens. Here we have the Augustinian age in Rome. Down here we have the Roman collapse, and then the oscillating around a mean in a high novelty domain that has characterized time since the fall of the Roman Empire.
We are in the last 7 years of a 26,000-year cycle. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can't hide. You can't get your mama to tell you it's not happening. You can't get scientists to say it doesn't happen unless you can get somebody to move the sky. The Mayans wrote about, described, and carved Neptune in their understanding of the universe, and Pluto, and Charon, and Xena. 2600 BC, they knew this. They wrote it down, carved it in stone. Well, we didn't discover Neptune until 1843. We didn't discover Pluto until 1931. We didn't discover Charon until 2001, and we didn't discover Xena until 2003. Explain that to me. Think about it. Where are you going to go if that's true? Whatever you think right now about who you are and where you came from, and that's true, then who are you and where'd you come from? And do you believe the history that you've been told?
There's a lot of people doing interesting work in the 2012 paradigm. People like John Major Jenkins, people like Jay Widener, people, well, like some of the people that we've assembled here, David Wilcock and David Flynn. But what has been missing is the physics behind those tales. Why was it that the Maya, for instance, were so fixated on the center of the Milky Way? How did they even know that the Milky Way galaxy was A, a galaxy, and B, it had a center? If you look at the Milky Way arching across the night sky, it is not readily apparent to the untrained eye that it has a center. It looks like a band of milky light circling the heavens, alternately tipped in one direction and another as the seasons unfold. The Maya knew it had a center. The Vedic tradition, half a world away, literally on the other side of this planet, thousands of years ago, knew the Milky Way was an assemblage of stars to which the sun belonged, and that we orbited around a center. In fact, they even had the concept that the center of the Milky Way was some incredibly all-encompassing, massive, dark object, i.e., a black hole. And modern science, in the last 10, 20 years, has demonstrated that, in fact, yes, a black hole, a dense object, not emitting light, but of intense gravity, something like 3 or 4 million times the mass of the sun, lurks at the center of the galaxy. And in fact, in astrology, it is the unsung 800-pound gorilla, or pink elephant, mixing our metaphors, Natalie, in the room. Because in terms of the influence, celestial influences that we now can discuss rationally in terms of the hyperdimensional model, in terms of those influences which influence not only our individual lives, but our collective lives as a people on this planet, it turns out that our geometric relationship to the center of the Milky Way galaxy is of overwhelming importance. And we will be able to demonstrate for you in a very elegant and very visual way that that geometric relationship to the galaxy, which comes to a penultimate climax at 11:11 a.m., December 21, 2012, is in fact a physically meaningful relationship and is behind, quite likely, all of the mythos that the Vedas and the Mayas and the Egyptians and the others have given us down through the centuries and thousands of years.
What I discovered, in a nutshell, is that there is this very rare astronomical alignment that's happening in the years around 2012. We might think of a 36-year window, and it's not just some random assortment of planets in a certain sign or something. It actually has to do with the entire framework of the sky. And it's called a galactic alignment. It's referred to as a galactic alignment. It's a real thing. It's a real empirical thing. Astronomers have calculated it. It happens only once every 26,000 years. And from the vantage point of the Earth, we will be lining up with the center of the Milky Way galaxy, the center of our Milky Way. And this happens only once every 26,000 years.
The Mayans give us, in the Western world, the greatest opportunity to see the changing face in time because they were obsessed with it. Because in time, the Mayans created calendars that were so accurate that they rival any calendar, and they're more precise than any calendar that we've created in our entire history. The Mayans invented the zero. The zero. Western consciousness didn't discover the zero for another 1,000 years. And the Mayans invented the zero because they needed to calculate the precession of planets as they moved so that they could build buildings that would be celebrations of events 800 to 1,000 years into the future. You know when we learned how to do that? Sometime in the 70s. And we had calculators and computers and telescopes. They didn't have any of that. So it's said.
The Mayans say that December 21st, 2012, that's when the cycle closes. What cycle? Okay. The 5,125-year cycle of history, 26,000-year cycle of the sun going around, the earth going around the ecliptic, and an even larger cycle, 104,000-year cycle. All these cycles are coming to an end. We are living in a really, really powerful, momentous event in time at this moment.
One wonders if there really is some empirical, scientific, energetic sort of basis to this galactic alignment. You know, we're lining up with the plane of the Milky Way galaxy. And I've really encouraged scientists and astronomers to look at this, and I really do believe that it probably can form the basis of sort of a new model of consciousness and changes going on this planet.
This, you know, you have to look at this. The Mayans were in the New World, and the Old World was dominated by the Babylonian civilization and the Babylonian concepts of time, which are based on 12. The Mayan concept is based on 13. Before history, most people used a 13-month calendar. The Mayan prophecy that I decoded, the prophecy of Pakal Votan, who was buried in the tomb at Palenque, says that the means of changing the time is to go from the Gregorian 12-month calendar to go to the perfect harmonic perpetual 13-month 28-day calendar. The Mayans used that calendar among other calendars. The Aztecs used that calendar. The Druids used that calendar. The Incas of South America used that calendar. It's the universal calendar. And the point is to make it to 2012 in peace and harmony. The message is we have to change the time. You change the time by changing the calendar. When you change the calendar, you change the program. Like the Gregorian calendar program is full of static and chaos, confusion, injustice, oppression, all of that stuff, inequality. And if we change that, we go to a calendar that is perfectly harmonic, perfectly perpetual. Every month is 28 days. Every month has 4 perfect weeks. Every month starts on Sunday and ends on Saturday. Every year starts on Sunday and ends on Saturday. Then we reintroduce harmony as the fundamental program of our life.
And in my books, Maya Cosmogenesis 2012 and Galactic Alignment, I did make a really good case for there being an encoded symbolism that sort of proves that the Maya did intend 2012 to target this galactic alignment. The Maya, who thrived some 2,000 years ago at this site of Izapa and stumbled across this galactic cosmology, this galactic cosmovision, are the ones to present us with this model by which we can understand the incredible changes and crises that are going on in the world today.
Right now, the human species is the only species that's out of joint. We're totally out of order. We're out of order because we're following a mechanistic time which is the clock, combined with the irregular time of the calendar, which creates a very crazy-making, accelerating process. Everyone is experiencing acceleration of time. Everyone is experiencing acceleration of consciousness.
It threatens to be a rally cry for indigenous cultures around the world to reassert their self-determination. I mean, if we were to say anything about 2012 in terms of something that might happen in that year or towards the end of that year, because the end date falls on December 21st of 2012, the solstice, we might suspect that the Maya and other indigenous cultures that have been suffering under the iron heel of Western capitalism for hundreds of years might rear up and try to take back some of their self-determination. What I look at is the actual Maya documents, you might say, the primary documents of the Maya tradition. So we have like the Maya creation mythology, and it's a world age doctrine. So it talks about a series of world ages, and we are approaching the end of one of those world ages. But the information, the Mayan information in it, is that the end of a cycle is not about a final destruction. It's about transformation and renewal. The general insight of the Maya prophecy is that at the end of the cycle, there's a deity in the creation myth. He's called Seven Macaw, and he exemplifies vain egoism. So this archetype will be seizing humanity, and it'll be controlling and deceiving humanity. And this is the prophecy for the years leading up to 2012. And certainly, I certainly wouldn't have to convince you that we look around us and we look at world leaders that are just deceiving and controlling humanity and trying to keep people stuck and limited and keep them unconscious.
What I'm going to show you here is the final terminus of the wave in 2012. Now remember, this is the same wave we've been looking at in all our discussion before, but finally the wave not only descends deep into novelty, it descends into the maximum possible depth of novelty, which is signified by the horizontal scale of the graph. In other words, and then it ceases. The wave is damped. If you think of the wave as an oscillation, well then this is its fixed point, and presumably its other fixed point is the birth of the universe.
The Mayan calendar is one example of a different civilization, and they actually had a system of two calendars that worked together. One you may be familiar with. It's called the Zolkin. This means the count of days. Zol is count and kin is day. Zolkin is count of days. And it is a 260-day calendar. Now, that really threw these guys for a loop, these archaeologists. 260 days. Well, this calendar was the personal calendar of the Maya. It was also the astrological, which is how you probably heard about it. It was the astrological calendar of the Maya. So the archaeologists just pitched that over their shoulder. Astrology, ha! Of course, they have no use for that. But we look at this personal calendar of the Maya. How personal can a calendar be? In this case, a person's first name, born as a Maya, was the day that they were born. Their first name. So it's not a nickname. My name would be 12 Ahau, Bahun Hun Ahau, Ian Lungold. And everybody who was born on the same day as me, on this 260-day calendar, would have the same name. We'd all be, if there was 100 people born that day, there would all be 12 Ahau. That's not so bad. There's a lot of Bobs and Sallys running around. It's going to work. The reason was because this 260-day calendar is made up of different energies. It's made up of 13 intentions that run 1 through 13, and then it starts over. It goes 1 through 13 again, and it goes over again. And there's 20 aspects of creation that run over and over again in a pattern. 12 times 13 times 20 equals 260. So there is a complete set of the 13 intentions repeated 20 times. This Zolkeen calendar worked along next to another calendar that we're going to be talking mostly about today. You'll see this calendar woven in, but this is pretty much what we're going to be talking about. The Tun calendar, T-U-N, Tun. And this is the Maya 360-day calendar. Now, the Tun calendar was known as the divine or prophetic. The prophetic calendar. Maybe you've heard something about the Mayan prophecies and how phenomenally accurate they were over thousands and thousands of years, including today. How profoundly accurate these things were. Those prophecies were all based on the Tun calendar with the intentions and aspects of the Zolkeen calendar. This is the 260-day calendar, the Zolkeen. This is the Tun calendar, the prophetic calendar. Now, each day on the Zolkeen, there's 260 days, like teeth of a gear. And then there's 360 teeth on this gear. This Zolkeen calendar revolves. And it makes that one move. Every 52 revolutions of this calendar, the two teeth that started out match back up. Every 52 revolutions of this, you get back to where you started. All of the Mayan pyramids are either 5 or 9 levels for a very specific reason. They were ceremonial centers. And the ceremonies and rituals that were done there were done to help demonstrate to the populace the perceptions or the considerations of their civilization about the calendar or about creation. It was their cosmology, built in huge piles of stone. What it says is that there are 9 different levels of creation or consciousness that exist or that will exist. Starting 16.4 billion, that's billion with a B, billion years ago. And this really threw the archaeologists off. What were little brown Indians in the jungle making pots? Thinking about numbers of 16 billion. It just didn't make any sense to them. Because after all, they were so primitive. 16.4 billion years ago is when the Maya say this physical universe began. Well, that doesn't line up with astronomers, does it? Astronomers, some 45 years ago, 50 years ago, had it down. Somewhere between 10 and 20 billion years ago, the universe started. Then, as we got better telescopes, so we could see further and further out, it moved from 10 to 20 to, well, maybe 12 to 20. Then we put up Hubble, and it went to 14 billion years ago that the universe started. You know what? I'll bet you that within the next couple of years, they're going to find out that the Maya, some 2,500 years ago, had it right to begin with. The Maya, although they had the pattern, never had all the facts that we're going to be talking about. Consciousness is evolving through these different stages. And they were at a particular stage that didn't have all the information we now can display. But this cycle, all the cycles actually, are named for their product, what that cycle produced. This one is called the cellular cycle, because way at the very end of this cycle is when life started. You notice these numbers down here at the bottom? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, to each level of this consciousness, there is 7 periods of day and 6 periods of night. 7 days to each level of creation. Where have we heard this before? The Bible. As a matter of fact. And before the Bible was written, before it was written in Hebrew, it was actually, the stories were written in Sumerian. In fact, the whole Bible is a rewrite. It's plagiarism, with a little bit of inventive editing thrown in here and there. The Sumerians, the first people to write, some of the first things they wrote was that there were 7 days and 6 nights in each level of creation. So the Maya were not the only people to have this information. They were only the most recent ancient civilization. They left the freshest tracks. Okay, the next cycle started 820 million years ago. Again, the Maya knew how many tunes each of these cycles were, but they didn't have all the science that we now have available. This cycle is called the mammalian. The mammalian cycle, because its product was mammals. $41 million years ago, we started the next cycle. Now remember, these things are written as numbers of tunes carved in stone 2,500 years ago. This 41 million years ago is an approximation of how many tunes. We started the family or familiar cycle. Now this is a huge step in consciousness. 40 million years ago is when monkeys showed up. And they developed a different kind of consciousness than had ever existed before. The consciousness of family. These 2 million years are divided by 13, 160,000 years to each day and night. So each one of these intentions lasted for 160,000 years, then it went to another intention, and that intention carried forward. And that intention were the steps of evolution. Next cycle started 2 million years ago. This was the beginning of what's called the tribal cycle. Okay, here's the next cycle started 102,000 years ago. That weight's getting lighter, isn't it? 102,000 ain't so bad. This is called the cultural cycle. Because this 102,000 years brought about our cultures. 8,000 years. Every 8,000 years, there was a change of intention. Here, in 3115 BC, that's about 5,116 years ago, we started a new cycle called the national consciousness. As an interesting coincidence, that line right there is the birth of Egypt, where King Minos, or Minos, married the upper and lower Nile cultures into the first nation. First idea of nation. Planetary cycle. (1755) is when it started. AD. The planetary cycle. And its time scale, all of these different individual intentions, changed every 19.7 years. This was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And since things have changed every 20 years or so, we are still living in these 20 years. The galactic consciousness started January 5th, 1999. January 5th, 1999 was that line right there. And now, these consciousnesses are shifting every 360 days. The next cycle, the last cycle, the universal cycle, will start February 10th, 2011. This whole cycle will be 260 days long. The whole cycle. The universal cycle starts February 10th, 2011, and it runs for a total of 260 days, right up to October 28, 2011. October 28, 2011. That is when all of these cycles, this one and this one and this one and this one and this one, all come to some sort of an end. During this cycle, the same amount of changes that are changing every 360 days will be changing in every 20 days. And you got the overall idea here. There seems to be some sort of an acceleration. Universal cycle The consciousness is conscious co-creation.
Yay.
And that evolution or that development will take 260 days. I'm fooling with you. Actually, it took 16.4 billion years. It's already happening right here, right now. Please notice that we are co-creating this experience.
I also got very interested in crop circles. I did a piece for Wired. And if psychedelics...
Have you been to England and seen them? Have you been in the energy of them?
I have been in the energy of them.
And what did you experience?
Quite interesting.
Tell us.
Well, you know, really, within like 2 or 3 minutes, you feel like, I mean, a lot of people just sink to the ground and start sort of spontaneously meditating or crying. I mean, you know, there's definitely a strong energy field that's created in these things. And, you know, it's a very complicated area because there are a lot of mischievous, hoaxing English people who are making them, and some people think they're all fake, and I think that they're probably not all fake, but I'm going to need to spend some time there to put the whole story together. You know?
And what do you think about, like, what people talk about in terms of ETs? Did you get any experience of that in any of your journeys or any of the shamanistic experiences?
One reason I got so interested in the crop circles is a lot of them are pointing to the same 2012 date in various ways, and there are also a lot of kind of shamanic, sacred geometrical patterns kind of recur in the crop circles. And, you know, my sense is they're pointing to this 2012 thing being a real event, and then perhaps, you know, Star Trek or Star Wars are not that far from the truth. I mean, perhaps, I mean, look how fast we've moved with our technology and how fast we've developed. There may be galactic races that are out there that are watching what's happening and are waiting till we get past a certain kind of evolutionary crisis to introduce themselves.
Or something.
Exactly. I take that relatively seriously at this point.
Crop circles first appeared in numbers, in large numbers. Mid-1970s, 75, 76, right around in there. And for those of you that may not be familiar with the crop circles, I'll review them just briefly. They were simply circles, patterns, in cereal grain crops in nearly every crop-producing country in the world, where the stalks of grain in an authentic crop circle, where they are gently bent at a 51-degree angle. They are still alive, they still produce their fruit, they may still be harvested if they're done early enough in their season. Researchers have discovered that samples of grains taken from within the crop circles are very different from the control samples that are taken outside of the circle. For example, the crystalline structure is different within the circle than it is from outside the circle. Seeds that are grown from within, samples taken from within this crop circle, germinate very quickly, they bud very quickly, and they produce more berries per unit than those taken from outside of the circle. There certainly are crop circles and glyphs that are hoaxed, and they do not produce the same phenomenon. They are not gently bent at a 51-degree angle. The stalks are actually broken on those. So in the mid-1970s, we began to see an increasing number of, at first they were circles, and the researchers were quick to say they're either hoaxed or they're natural phenomenon. They're just wind whipping these crops into vortices. Well, we began to see things like this. And I put this slide in here so that you could see the detail, the interwoven nature of the stalks. It's pretty difficult to hoax something like this, and especially over glyphs that are 200 and 300 yards in diameter. An interesting side note, in 1994, for the first time, we've never found any animals that were caught up within any of these crop circles, probably because most animals, when they hear or sense whatever it is that's creating these circles, the animals run. Well, there is one particular animal that does just the opposite of that, and that is a porcupine. Porcupines, when they sense danger, they simply curl up into a ball and stay put until the danger has passed. Well, in 1994, for the first time in Canada, there were 2 porcupines whose quills were actually woven into the structure of the crop circle as it was unfolding. They were no longer living. They were very flat at that point, and their quills were very easily woven into the structure of this crop circle. To the best of my knowledge, that's the first time that that's happened. So we see these complex patterns that are very difficult to hoax. Well, the simple circles began to become more and more complex. Each year, the number of circles would increase through the early 1990s, and each year there would be what was called a grand finale, the greatest, most complex, most beautiful crop circle of all. This particular image here is from 1993, I believe, and this is considered to be the grand finale of 1993. Well, the researchers that were saying we had a natural phenomenon of wind whipping these crops into vortices looked at this and they said, well, this is pretty complex. It looks very intentional. Maybe there's something else happening. In 1994, I had the opportunity to attend and present a body of information at a crop circle conference in England. And while we were there, crop circles were appearing at the rate of about 11 per day all around the area where we were at. The next slide that I'll show you is what I consider to be the grand finale of 1994. A beautiful image of a very powerful pattern in the science of sacred geometry. If you're familiar with sacred geometry, you know that this is called the seed of life, and that it is an integral component of a greater pattern called the flower of life. If you are not familiar with sacred geometry, you simply know by looking at this, you sense, you feel that there's something important happening here. This is a very powerful resonant symbol that we have. Well, 1995 crop season has just completed. We just got the slides back. I haven't really shown them to many people. And the next image that I have is, for me, one of the most interesting in 1995. And what you're seeing here, many researchers believe that we're seeing a model of our solar system. Here's the sun in the center. And just beyond the sun, you see Mercury in the orbit of Mercury, Venus in the orbit of Venus, the orbit of Earth, and there's no Earth in this orbit. And then Mars in the orbit of Mars, and the asteroid belt in its orbit, and we're not seeing anything beyond that. To many researchers, they believe that this is saying something very similar to what many of the crop circle messages have said, and that's simply that there is a change unfolding upon the earth, within the lives of the people upon the earth. I do not necessarily believe that this means Earth is disappearing. I believe that Earth, as we have always known Earth, is going through a tremendous transition and will probably never look the same following the transition as it did before that. And not intending to suggest here in this slide that there will be no Earth at all. Simply not the same Earth as we've seen before.
This crop formation appeared in 1995, and it was called the Missing Earth Formation because it seems to represent an asteroid belt and the orbits of Mars, Earth, Venus, Mercury and the Sun. In the fields at Etchelhampton, Wiltshire, 1997, we had a 780 unit grid, and at the time that was 30 by 26. Michael Glickman, the crop circle researcher and a legendary geometer, he said he thought this was about 2012 because that's the exact number of weeks, 780 weeks between the time it appeared and the same time in the year 2012. I think this is the most amazing crop formation that we've had associated with the Maya calendar, because April 2004 it actually ghosted was the second one to be reported this year. But last year, July 2003, Huish in Wiltshire, this 13-pointed star appeared. And it's a dead copy of a diagram from Jose Arguelles' Mayan factor, which I've just shaded in for emphasis here. And that diagram was to describe the 13 Baxton cycle itself. So here it is in the fields 2 years running. This is a crop formation in which we had the Ouroboros, which represents cycles of time. You've got the pale horse of death, Adam's grave, and the caduceus pointing to it, but that doesn't necessarily mean death as in bad news, because it could be the death of the species, the end of the species, and the start of a new species, the end of Homo sapiens, and the start of a new species of Homo superior, Homo perfectus, whatever.
We're going into the 2012 subject. Of course, crop circles have been on everybody's mind. This was the formation that came down a couple years ago, which started out in an unfinished way. You notice that all of these blocks are completely solid, and this area is solid as well. Well, the circle makers, whoever they are, came back. And when they came back, this is what we got. Now you have time markings and symbols from the Mayan calendar, okay? And the alignment of these winged discs in terms of what markers they're pointing to, which corresponds to the Mayan system and the Aztec system, gave you an exact time reference of the length of time between when this was created and 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar. So this is a self-referential 2012 diagram given to us by whoever is behind the circle phenomenon. This is one of many crop circles which seems to suggest that the secret to understanding 2012 and this mystery that we're dealing with right here in our talk today is in vibration. That looks an awful lot like a vibrating puddle of liquid. This is what happens when you take vibration to the next step. You get sacred geometry, and I'm going to show you more about that in a second. If you can imagine, this is a sphere and a cube and then another sphere. This is the Froxfield chromosome formation. Obviously, the circle makers are saying, you know, 2012, pay attention to your DNA, right? Except here's the thing. The chromosome's all broken up. And that's what happens before there's about to be a cell metamorphosis. Now, this is even more interesting. Check this out. What does that look like to you? A double helix. Okay, and there's 12 stations. Then down here, you get an even weirder thing. You get a triple helix, but they still have that same formation, and then boom, what's this? And look at the timelines. This is less than a month apart in 1999, and this came out in 96. So it appears that there is a message being given about the basic nature of DNA changing somehow. This is another crop formation which shows you DNA very, very clearly. As you can see that it's twisting, and you can see the ladder and the helixes. So there's something very interesting going on here. Now, this is one of the most staggering formations that's ever come down. And as I said yesterday, the idea that two drunken Englishmen stomped it down with a funny hat and a string and board after coming back from the bar one night, it just doesn't fly. This is much too complex to be something that could have been done without an elaborate. And you know, the thing is, I mean, there have been some cases where formations like this have been documented as showing up within a 1-hour period. Like somebody's out there at night, they see nothing, and then there's lights and the dogs start barking and everything goes nuts, and then all of a sudden, boom, there it is.
September 11th, men armed with knives, armed with chemical, biological, or even nuclear weapons. The fanatics who terrorist killers, September 11th, terrorists of Al-Qaeda, terrorists, Taliban, nuclear weapons, terrorists, 9/11 terror. My fellow Americans, we have already been attacked. Terror.
Terrorists for terrorism, September 11th, September 11th. The terrorists, war and danger, September 11th, September 11th, terrorism, global terrorism, the horror, terrorism, terrorists. Terrorists, 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 the terrorists. Terrorists, terrorist, terrorism. September 11th, global terrorism, terrorism. Terrorism. September 11th, world terrorism, terrorism. Terrorism, 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 terrorists. September 11th. Threat of global terrorism, terrorism, terrorist, global terrorism, terrorism, terrorism. September 11, 2001, global terrorism. Terrorists, global terrorism, terrorism, terrorists, September 11th, terror.
Terrorism, the attack on our homeland, back from the attack on our economy, and back from the attack on our way of life. Terrorism, terrorists, hate. We must be fierce and relentless and terminate terrorism. Terrorists, you defeat them. It yearns to destroy not just the individual, but the entire international order. That's why America is safer with George W. Bush as president.
September 11th, terrorism, September 11th. Terrorism, terrorists, September 11th.
Hera, terrorist. Terrorist.
Terror, September 11th. Threat, tyranny, terrorist, tyranny, tyranny. People hate us. Terror.
Terrorism, September the 11th. Terror, terrorist, terror, terrorist, terror. Weapons of mass destruction. September the 11th. September the 11th. Terrorists, terrorists. The evil terrorists. Terrorists. The terrorists know.
The terrorists know.
The biggest terrorists are in government. Of whatever persuasion, by the way, I ain't being party political here. Sod the lot of them. I'm very, I believe in equal opportunity and equal rights and stuff. Sod the lot of them equally. The terrorists, even those that we're told were terrorist events from external terrorists, when the evidence often points to the fact that it was not that at all, except that they were the front for it, they can kill horrendously a few thousand people at maximum, or they can, like 9/11 and that stuff, or they can kill fewer in other events. Horrific, horrible, etc. Yes, but these people, or the people that controlled them, pepper-bombed Baghdad full of kids and civilians, and have so far killed and maimed hundreds of thousands of civilians to save them from a dictator. And now, Hillary Clinton, John McCain, Barack Obama stands for change you can believe in. These people are controlled by the same force. Interesting, you know, when Clinton came in, Bill Clinton in, 92, he kept talking all the way through his election campaign. Change, I stand for change. He's going on, Obama. Change, I stand for change. Why? Why do they play that game? Interesting. Because of the way the system stitches up people, denies them choice, denies them equilibrium, happiness, and all these things, and what they desire. At any point in time, the vast majority of people are not happy with their status quo. So anyone who comes along and says, I stand for change, oh yeah, anything's better than this, yes mate, change. Very powerful because of that situation. Now, Barack Obama, his main man, and it's not just in this election, it goes back a long time, is a guy called Zbigniew Brzezinski. Brzezinski was the national security advisor in the Carter administration, and he went public in the last year, 18 months or so, admitting that he, in that position, worked to manipulate the Soviet Union to invade Afghanistan because he wanted to weaken the superpower, and in his words to the effect of, I wanted to create for them their Vietnam. It didn't matter that he did that, except that that invasion cost 1 million Afghan lives. And that's how it's possible for a few to dictate the direction of the world, with the many working every day unknowingly to do it for them. And so, one name that is given to these families is the Illuminati, the illuminated ones. They know more than we do because they keep what they know from us. And behind the corporations, different masks on the same face, is actually a corporation. Different directors, different frontmen, not always, mind, interconnected directorships, but at control in the hands of the few. And it's the same with politics. Presidents, prime ministers, heads of the World Bank, Secretary General of NATO, they are perceived to be in the red bit at the top in terms of their own hierarchy. No, no. They're somewhere down. I'm probably being optimistic with this. They are there. The here today, come tomorrow people that I mentioned earlier are there simply to fill the public positions through which those that operate in the shadows above them in the pyramid dictate the policy. And that's why the policy never changes, no matter what government's in power. An incessant centralization. Tell people, if they say no to just one thing, say no to the microchip. Because he said even those that are becoming aware of it, and this is way back, this is like I say 97, and some were, most weren't, think it's about electronic tagging. And on one level he said it is. He said, but the real reason for microchipping is because once you've got a microchip inside you, can be electronically connected to a computer system that can manipulate you physically, take you out from a distance, that can manipulate you emotionally, because the body's an electrochemical entity. You get hold of the body, access the body chemically or electrically, you can do mayhem. And when we feel emotion or think, it is an electrochemical process. So if you get a microchip inside you manipulating that process, they can manipulate the way you think. They, as he said, they can make people aggressive, they can make people docile, either as an individual or en masse. You basically become a robot, he was saying. Say no to the microchip. Fear. Fear, the four-letter word that controls the world. Once you get people in fear, they will look outside of themselves for people or organizations to protect them from what they have been manipulated to fear. Fear is the greatest of all mass mind manipulation techniques. Because of fear, we have this introduced, justified by what I've been talking about. This is a poster from Germany in 1934. That's a poster from London today.
It is very important to understand that when you fear loss, fear death, fear war, fear terrorism, or fear change, you are giving others the ability to control you based on those fears. When you fight against poverty or against racism, when you fight for relationships or for freedom, you are outwardly attempting to repress that which has been placed before you to conquer inwardly. These situations are mirrors of our fears. This is why it is important to love and only love. Love those who stand with you, but especially those who stand against you. Don't look at your fears as a threat. Rather understand that this material world is only a physical manifestation of either the love or fear in your consciousness.
We're going through a sieve here. Wheat from the chaff, sheep from the goats. Exactly as prophesied, exactly on time. We're going to go through the eye of the needle, folks. And you don't get through that eye encumbered. I bet you've noticed things falling off, haven't you? First, all kinds of considerations about who you are or who you should be. Those things have fairly well dissipated, or you wouldn't be in this room. Maybe some job positions. Maybe a relationship or two have just sort of peeled off. Expect a lot more of that.
The CIA scientist told me in 1997, when no one was talking about nanotechnology, that the microchips outside of the public arena in the secret projects were so small they can be inserted in a hypodermic needle during vaccination programs. And of course the people giving the vaccination have no idea that that's the case. Aspartame is a sugar substitute. Have a look for this if you haven't come across it. It's in virtually everything now. And aspartame is a excitotoxin, they call it. It excites brain cells and destroys them. It stops the brain working efficiently. They sent letters out to naval pilots in America a few years ago, telling them not to drink soft drinks with aspartame in before they fly, because it affects their brain's ability to think and sharp. And who brought aspartame into existence? Donald Rumsfeld. He was head of Searle Pharmaceuticals. They couldn't get aspartame through the Food and Drug Administration checks in America to become part of, the food that we eat and drink. And so they appointed him because he was close friends with the Reagan-Bush administration, and the Reagan-Bush administration changed the head of the Food and Drug Administration when he came in, and suddenly the checks were forgotten and aspartame came out. And Monsanto now control aspartame as they control GM food. Fluoride in the water is an excitotoxin. It excites brain cells, destroys them, and it suppresses thought. The first known time that fluoride was put into water supplies was in the Nazi concentration camps to keep the people docile. Genetically modified food is designed to genetically modify us. Vaccines, 25 vaccinations before the age of 2 with a growing, still developing immune system. All the stuff they give us. Electromagnetic soup. The rabbit hole is seriously deep.
I think that it's all about keeping the clamp on. They're trying to keep the clamp on so that people cannot become more conscious and take back their rights as human beings.
You know, and also it's like as the whole mainstream kind of narrative is becoming more and more like a sort of toxic cartoon, you know, for anybody who has a kind of intelligence, you know, they have to at a certain point just begin to question this. You know, it's like if you read the New York Times every day and that's your vision of reality, there's just like no hope for you. I mean, there's just nothing left in that thing to hang on to. So, you know, it's just going to be a very polarizing situation for the next few years.
All propaganda must be so popular on such an intellectual level that even the most stupid of those towards whom it is directed will understand it. People can be made to perceive paradise as hell and the other way round, to consider the most wretched sort of life a paradise. On the basic intellectual level, it's the terrorists, and we've got to protect you from the terrorists, so we've got to take your freedoms away so we can protect your freedom. Oh, that sounds good, I'll vote for him.
That there are real beings out there who have a real effect on what's happening here. And these positive forces, it's my understanding, are guiding us through an evolution on the planet. And they basically want to make sure that it doesn't break. They want to make sure that things stay as clean as they possibly can right up to 2012, which is when this apparent dimensional shift event happens. And so there is a very deliberate effort being made to thwart and to offset those kinds of negative future possibilities. That's why, like, for example, almartinraw.com had this whole whistleblower thing that came out about how the Bush administration was planning to put in fake weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, because if they could have found, and they even said it on the news, remember that? We know there's 10,000 gallons of anthrax and da-da-da-da, and it's right there in Tikrit around Baghdad, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's because that's where they're going to put it.
Yeah.
But then what happens is somebody else finds out they're going to do this fake thing, and then they go and frag the team that does it and kill them on friendly fire.
Yeah.
And now they're out there somewhere. Nobody knows where the hell they are.
Yeah.
So the point is that all these little things keep happening, which appear to be random, but they're guided by higher intelligence to ensure that these bad things don't happen.
The whole facade of civilization is just coming down. We want to defend it with bombs and wars and so on, but that's not all that's going to do is further the process of it coming down. It's all inevitable. So the point is, we have the opportunity. How many people in the world are for peace? And how many people in the world really are for war? If everyone in the world who exists in the world is for peace could understand this point that we can all have peace if we unify and change the time and say, that's it. We're going into a new time. We're going from a time of war to a time of peace. We're going from a time of fear to a time of love. We're going from a time of chaos to a time of harmony. We're going to solve our problems ourselves, and we're going to enter a new time that is going to reorganize our mind, that's going to reorganize how we function in the world, that's going to reorganize our priorities. Rather than building more things, we want to repair the damage.
In the year 2000, in America, an organization set up in the 90s by the people who controlled and control the Bush administration this last 8 years was set up. It was called the Project for the New American Century, and it was created by people who have since become known as neocons or neoconservatives. September 2000 they published this, and it was called Rebuilding America's Defenses, Strategies, Forces and Resources for a New Century. This is what it said. I'll come to that. These are three main people who were in the creation of the Project for the New American Century. Dick Cheney, Vice President, more power than the President. Donald Rumsfeld, Defense Secretary at the time of 9/11 and the invasion of Iraq. Paul Wolfowitz, Defense Deputy Secretary at the same time. 1 year after that document was published, 9 months after the people that wrote it came to power in the Bush administration, America had what Bush described at the time as our Pearl Harbor. And everything that has happened since 9/11, that has unfolded off the pages of that document quite demonstrably, has been justified by 9/11. Even academics that rubbished it to start with are saying the official story doesn't make sense. You've got pilot organizations that are saying, pilots against 9/11 and stuff, who are saying there's no way those people who couldn't fly Cessnas could do what they did with those planes. Endless people now. There are engineers organizations against 9/11 who are pointing out that those buildings could never have collapsed as they did because of fire and steel. But no one investigates it.
So when those towers went down, it doesn't matter whether it was actually terrorists or who did it, how it happened, why it happened. It happened. It happened. It inevitably happened. It was the nerve center, the pineal gland of the technosphere was taken out.
And the technosphere has to evolve if the planet's going to survive.
Well,
it has to evolve into back into harmony.
It has to evolve back, and so that point there, that puncture, that was a big puncturing of the technosphere. So now there's a lot of retrograde, regressive action to try to maintain it, but it's not going to hold because the biosphere is in danger, the global warming, everything else. So what you're seeing is like the technosphere is slowly going to be coming down. It's not pretty, but it's coming down because it's not the truth. It's not natural. It's not the truth. It exists at the expense of the biosphere. It exists at the expense of the Amazonian rainforest. It exists at the expense of the different species and everything. Right. So it's inevitable. It's coming down. That's why it's called. This is why this is called the end time. And it's coming down because we're headed to 2012. So the point is that we have to just say, hey, it's coming down. No matter how many flags you fly, it's still coming down. So we're saying, instead of flying flags, let's see what else we can do. Let's see if we can do something about it. And the Mayan prophecies say, yes, you can do something about it. Just change your timing frequency. Get back with the big universal evolutionary program. You just took a big detour from evolutionary mainstream. You caused yourself a lot of suffering. And some people might be well off from this, but a lot of other people are suffering more and more every day, and you're playing with very dangerous toys to protect a crumbling facade.
Well, I think that we do create our own realities, and to boil it down to a simple decision, it's great to be informed about what's really going on, first of all, and that must be said. But we can't succumb to the fear-mongering tactics that are being tossed around, because we can succumb to fear and close up, but really what needs to happen so that we can create a good reality is to open up to the real possibilities. In other words, to open up and be guided by what we might call higher principles or a higher vision of the future. So instead of being consumed with reacting in fear or combating all the crap that the controllers are trying to throw at us, somehow we need to transcend that and open up our minds to the highest possible future and then create that together.
It is important to remember that your consciousness has more power than any wave that could ever be beamed at you. So if you ever start worrying about electromagnetic mind control or all these silly things that people get focused on, that's something that you don't need to worry about.
We are living through, in a 67-year period that stretches from 1945 to 2012, a compressed version of a larger historical epoch, 4,306 years long, that also ends in 2012. So that we have reached, by this reckoning, the late 700s right now. This is what we are living through. And ahead of us lies the Gothic Renaissance, the Renaissance, the European Enlightenment, the discovery of the Newtonian mechanics, the discovery of the New World, that all lies ahead of us. It all has to be compressed into the next 22 years of time. And that is what accounts for the crazy quality of modernity. It's what accounts for fads and fashions. You know, hemlines are rising and falling in a rhythm based on the rise and fall of empires millennia ago. And these things are as causally linked as the orbit of the Earth is linked to the sun, you see. Because we are being drawn toward the attractor through shorter and shorter epochs. And not only must the entire last 4,000 years of history be compressed into this 67-year period from 1945 to 2012, but there is a 384-day period preceding December 22nd, 2012, when the last 67 years and the last 4,300 years have to be compressed into that. Then there's a final 6-day period when all of these things are compressed again. And so do you see what's happening? The spiral is tightening as it goes faster and faster. The resonances are impinging. The thing is getting nuttier and nuttier and nuttier as computers link all cultures together, all informational barriers dissolve. Everything is becoming connected to everything else. Not only everything in the present moment, but all past moments as well are being drawn, compressed, squeezed toward the production of the transcendental object at the end of time, which is nothing less than all time, all space, shrunk down to an atomic dimension and handed back to us.
If I've made any contribution to this, then one of the things that I'm most proud of is to have come up with the phrase problem, reaction, solution to describe the most used and the most powerful method of mass, mind and emotional manipulation that has been used on us to advance this agenda. It used to be called the Hegelian dialectic, and I thought problem, reaction, solution would sum it up more succinctly. What it means is that you want to change society in a way that if you did it openly and had a meeting and said, right, well, tell the public this is what we're going to do, you know that you would get a massive public reaction against what you want. So you don't do it openly. You play this technique. Stage one, you create a problem. It could be a terrorist attack, it could be a war, it could be a government collapse, it could be a run on a currency, it could be a credit crunch, rising food prices, rising mortgages. Anything that will give you the opportunity to install the solution to that problem that will advance your agenda. Once you've covertly created the problem, you then tell the people through a pathetic mainstream media the version of that problem that you want the public to believe, i.e. Bin Laden orchestrated 9/11, Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy, whatever. If we had a journalistic profession, even just in any way justifying the name, problem, reaction, solution fall down, because the explanation would be investigated, it would be found to be wanting, it would be reported to the people, this would collapse. Because we don't have a journalistic profession worthy of the name, the problem's created. The cover story of the problem is then reported to the people as official history, uninvestigated, and what they're looking for at stage two is a reaction from the public that says, in effect, something must be done, what are they going to do about it? Fear, outrage, do something. And then those who've covertly created the problem, got the public reaction, do something, then openly, through changes in legislation, offer the solutions to the problems they have themselves covertly created. And what are those solutions? They are changes in society to advance the Orwellian Big Brother state and the centrally controlled global agenda.
Television is the greatest and most all-pervasive hypnotist and propaganda tool ever conceived. TV teaches people what to think, but not how to think. And TV has given modern humans an utterly false perception of society, of the world, and of each other. Through TV, the power elite have succeeded in creating a distracted, misinformed, divided and class-driven society suffering historical amnesia and completely oblivious to the true realities of their surroundings. And all of these people view themselves as truly informed and are very quick to berate and ridicule anyone who offers them an alternate perspective. Subsequently, through the ideas put into their heads by TV and through a TV-driven obsession with the collecting of meaningless trinkets, fashions and possessions that the TV tells them defines who they are as people, the power elite have also managed to rob most of the common man of their wealth, their lands, their skills, their education and their history. But most importantly, it has robbed people of their ability to think critically and objectively. And that is exactly what television was designed to do and exactly why it was invented. Every television set is also specifically designed to emit alpha waves. These can be clearly seen as a series of horizontal lines that run across the screen from top to bottom at regular intervals when using a camera to film an operating TV set, but they cannot be detected by the naked eye. These regular lines are not simply a normal part of the functioning of your picture tube. They are there for a particular reason, and they travel across the screen at a predetermined and very specific pace. How often have you seen someone sit at a TV and say, "I don't like this program," and yet they sit there and watch it anyway? How often have you done it yourself? It is because these horizontal lines are there to generate these hypnotic alpha waves. Alpha waves place you into a trance-like state as you are told what to think by scripted newsreaders, and told what to buy, what to wear, where to go, and always kept otherwise distracted by sport, meaningless celebrity gossip, and a barrage of sex and entertainment, nowadays ever more frequently punctuated by messages of fear and warnings of imminent terror. These alpha waves produced by your TV set affect your electrical field even if you are not watching it. The TV merely has to be on. They become addictive as your body becomes used to the energy field, and many people would simply feel unable to cope without the daily fix of their favourite TV show. Then this hypnotic state carries on throughout the day as people work robot-like at their given tasks, usually discussing whatever the television taught them with their co-workers. Often people think they are discussing their own thoughts, but when the conversation is really analysed, it's usually not. It's about what show they watched last night, or sport, or something they learned from the Discovery Channel, their feelings towards the opposite sex, or perhaps something like the War on Terror. And whether they realise it or not, what they are talking about, and 98% of what they think they know about anything at all, has been taught to them by the television, or by print media that is wholly owned and controlled by the very same 6 people who own all the TV stations. That's right, 6 people. 60 years ago, the media in the Western world was run by 86 small corporations who all competed to deliver the best and most informative news. Today, it is run as a well-oiled, very streamlined and tightly controlled machine by just 6, who now control all major Western mainstream television and print media. And with the current rate of corporate growth, that number is set to soon drop to 3. This has set an extremely dangerous precedent, as it means that all televised and mainstream print media is now controlled by very, very few people. For a better and more informed perspective, obtain your news online from one of the many emerging independent websites, and go to many sites from different countries and sources to compare the same story from a variety of perspectives. You have been told that the internet is an unreliable source of information, and it is true that there are many bogus websites. But there is also a lot of very reliable information from very reliable sources, if you look in the right places. And remember, the ones who are telling you the thousands of independent websites who have opposing views to the mainstream shouldn't be trusted number only 6. It is just that it is those 6 who control all the major media. So those 6 are able to control most of what information gets to the general public, and how such information is presented. It must also be duly considered that all of these 6 media corporations have extremely close ties to major financial institutions and arms manufacturers. Such a conflict of interests immediately poses huge questions regarding the objectivity and reliability of any information presented by these organisations. And if that were not bad enough, each one of these 6 corporations gets their news from only one of 2 sources: Reuters or the Associated Press. These 2 organisations serve as an international news pool and channel all information down to the networks. Only Reuters actually owns the Associated Press, and Reuters itself is wholly owned by the Rothschilds. This is why there is never any negative press about the World Bank or the international banking cartels reported to the people by the mainstream media. It is why the majority of people have no idea about Codex Alimentarius or the real effects of fluoride, and simply do not know how the world and its corrupt money system is really run.
At the 33rd level of Freemasonry, of the Scottish Rite, that's the highest official level, they have a motto: Ordo ab chaos, order out of chaos. Problem, reaction, solution. You try manipulating harmony, very difficult. You try manipulating chaos, piece of cake. They want chaos.
Well, if you're navigating, it is also important to realize where you are on the planet. And with respect to 33 1/3, there's something very interesting about that, because 33 latitude and 33 longitude, both above and below the equator, are only touching one place on this planet, on actual terra firma. And I looked into this with a little bit more scrutiny, because our modern longitudinal line, based on the Greenwich meridian, was only installed in 1884 during the Global Meridian Conference. Alan Chester Arthur was the president at that time. People from all over the world came to New York and got together to figure out where they're going to put the prime meridian. This is the Paris meridian, and it was established hundreds of years longer than the Greenwich meridian. The Knights Templars, the Crusaders, they would measure the Earth by this line, not this line. Latitudinally, it's a no-brainer. 33 1/3 has always been right here, unless, of course, we've been knocked out of our kilter in orbit. But pay special attention to this little place right here, because it is the mountain that's been recorded from antiquity as a place where something extraordinary happened, the most extraterrestrial-like situation you can talk about from history. 33.33 goes perfectly through one of the 3 peaks of Mount Hermon. It's distinguished by 3 peaks in all the literature, and exactly through 33.33 here by the Paris meridian, which is also called the Rose Line. And this is what happened here. It's the Book of Enoch. It goes into detail, much more detail than the Bible does about it, and because it's an extra biblical text, sometimes it's not held up with much esteem. But there are a lot of things it has to say that the fraternities of the illuminated groups across time have paid special attention to. And it says that when the sons of men had multiplied in those days, beautiful and comely daughters were born to them. It's Genesis 6. And the watchers, sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. And they said to one another, come, let us choose for ourselves wives from the daughters of men, and let us beget ourselves children. And they descended to the peak of Mount Hermon.
There's going to come a time, and it ain't too long from now, when we're going to have to look our children in the face, in the eyes, and we're going to have to answer the question without blinking and without averting them. What were you doing, Daddy, Mummy, Granddad, Grandma, when the fascist state came in that now controls every facet of our lives, including our thoughts? What were you doing when it came in? Now, for what, all my ills and all the rest of it, I won't have to blink. How many other people will be trying to look the other way? We have a chance now, still, not to be in that position.
So the biggest issue in this transformational point in the changing face of time is the reduction of stress. Illness in the emotional, mental, and physical self starts with unresolved conflicts that create stress, or the inability to be in control of events, or the continuous repetition of a monotonous, mental, unfulfilling spiritually of a mechanism that you do every day. Going to work. You know, why do dentists kill themselves? They have one place to be, one monotonous, always instilling fear and pain in a person, and no way to create because they are on a certain budget. They got to get in and get out and get it done. And there's no real thanks except a pretty smile. And they kill themselves. So stress.
Now, what I've found, you make yourself sick. You may not believe it, but you're the one that gives yourself the illness, the disease. If you're that powerful that you can make yourself ill, you're also powerful enough that you can take it away.
To live in this world is an opportunity that you were earned to be able and to create and to hold a spiritual consciousness through some really turbulent times to come. You wouldn't be sitting in this room if you weren't ready. You're sitting in this room because you're getting another piece of data to be able to make decisions upon as you move forward in this world that is coming, the changing face of time. In our lifetime, we will bear witness to a cosmic event in the beginning of an age. It has upheaval, it has changes, it has great shifts and great perspectives, and some of it is a little frightening.
You will go through many, many relationships. You'll go through many, many experiences. Sometimes they take years. Sometimes they take months. And suddenly you will be faced with what for you is the most tremendous challenge of your life. When that happens, what I will say to you is congratulations. In the amassing of the tools, that experience is not possible until you know that you have everything you need to gracefully move through that time in your life.
There's nothing wrong with what is going on. Nothing. It is precisely, exactly what we want to have happen. We want all of these power elite to be exposed to the concept of ethics. And who has all that power? Is it Bush? Is it Caesar? We have.
There are only two emotions that humankind experiences: fear and love. All other emotions branch either directly or indirectly from these two emotions. Fear has a long and slow frequency vibration to it, while love has a very rapid and high frequency. To show that vibration is the very foundation of existence, Hans Jenne developed what is known as cymatics in the 1940s to show that when vibrations of sound are passed through a form of media, there is a set pattern that will follow. When the frequency increases, the media develops into a more complex pattern. This is precisely what is happening to our Earth and to humanity. There are 64 possible codes of amino acids in our DNA structure made from 4 elements: carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. By any means of logic, we should have all 64 codes activated within our DNA structure. Yet we presently only have 20 active codes.
We have 64 possibilities. 64 possibilities. And of these 64 possibilities, it appears that only 20 of these codes are turned on right now for us. The 20 amino acid touches where it crosses this double helix is what determines where the site is that code will either be turned off or turned on. If we're going to have an antenna at this site, it will only be turned on if the wave of emotion crosses this, this double helix. Well, this is really interesting for us because two things. First of all, The waves of emotion, researchers have determined that you and I are primarily capable of only two emotions. Many derivatives of those emotions, and two primary emotions, fear and love. Fear and love. Well, fear is a long, slow wave of emotion. So this wave of fear is a long, slow wave and touches relatively few sites on this DNA. So an individual living in fear is limited to the number of antennae that they have available to them, whereas an individual living in the pattern of love, this is love in DNA. You can see it's a higher frequency, shorter wavelength. We have many more potential sites for coding along that genetic pattern. This information, this is amazing. This is the first time we've ever had a hard digital link between emotion and genetics. And what we're saying is this, that the way you interpret and perceive emotion in your lives directly, linearly affects and determines how your body responds genetically.
We are dealing with a galactic energy field. It's a full halo expanding energy field that goes through the entire galaxy, and when it reaches us, it causes changes in our solar system, it causes activation of our DNA molecule, and that, my friends, is what's causing these 65 million year cycles and 26 million year cycles of species evolution in the fossil record.
Ron Sakeley, Department Chairman, Chemistry, University of California, Berkeley, showed that DNA acts as an antenna for cellular upregulation. The primary function they taught us about what DNA is about. It's a receiver and transmitter of photons, light and phonon sound. For what? Cellular upregulation, meaning that the water molecules, the pyramid power around the DNA spiral energizing strands are taking in the spiritual energy of love vibrations and then sending it out for manifesting, precipitating in a quantum field, the physical matter of the body.
This is important to understand because another researcher named Vladimir Popanov measured tiny particles of light called photons inside a vacuum tube. The photons were scattered as expected. A sample of DNA was then entered into the vacuum tube and they measured the photons again. They found that the particles of light aligned themselves along the axis of the DNA. Then, as they removed the DNA sample, the photons remained aligned to the same form of the DNA even though no DNA was present. This is what is known as the phantom DNA experiment. Science has now bridged a very important gap between physical and ethereal, or spiritual. Our emotions directly affect the structure of our DNA, which directly shapes the physical world we experience every day. So the messages left by the ancients that we've explained here were more than just prophecies about a one-world government or a new world order. We now understand why the study of the heavenly bodies were so important. The rotation and orbit of all that makes up our universe serves as a clock to map changes and transitions. This helped the ancients understand that the change of the heavenly bodies were a mirror to the changes of all existence. December 21st, 2012 is simply a natural transition from one form of energy to the next, the transcendental evolution of man. This date is what's known as 0 point. Our sun, as well as our planet Earth, is losing its magnetic field as the Earth is slowing in its rotation. All the while, its base resonant frequency, also known as the Schumann cavity resonance, is increasing in accordance with the predictable sequence of the Fibonacci theory. At a cellular level, our bodies respond to an electromagnetic pulse. The ancients called this the sacred circuit. The cells receive this pulse from the brain, which receives its pulse from the heart, which receives its pulse from the earth. This pulse comes from the solar system, which from there comes from the galaxy, which ultimately comes from our entire universe. We literally share a pulse with all of existence. Yet another example of everything being one.
As the body is adjusting with this, the new frequency, the cells are receiving new instructions. This is what is creating these temporary physical things that we're experiencing. The new instructions that our body is being given.
When you feel fear, you are shooting energy out of your field. When you feel love and trust, you are building energy from the cosmos to yourself. this has a direct effect on biological healing. I have an interview that I'm going to air pretty soon with Dr. Glenn Ryan, in which he proved on a microbiological level with molecular genetics that the DNA molecule changes its form based on the energy that you send to it with your consciousness. And when you send the emotion of gratitude, that was the one word that he found was the most important one. Gratitude, more than anything else, heals damaged DNA. You can kill DNA by what's called a heat fix, and it unwinds. And by the sense of loving gratitude, the DNA rewinds and comes back together.
Trust this. You are a great, powerful, mighty, playful, spiritual being with dignity, direction, and purpose before you came into this room or into this life. And you will be a great, powerful, and mighty spiritual being, playfully, with dignity, direction, and purpose when you leave here.
Someone said to me, what would change the world quicker than anyone else? I would say this, anything else, it would change overnight if we did this, because everything would come from it. If we stopped making decisions about our actions based on what is right for us in the moment and started doing what we knew to be right by conscience and justice, this world would transform. This world has been created as we experience it by billions of people deciding every day, what do I do in the interests of me? Once we start saying, what do I do in the interests of justice, fairness, and my own conscience, actions change, the world changes. And we are in control of that.
I have had it proven to me on multiple levels of redundancy that so many of the negative prophecies that you see on the internet are simply not going to come true.
Yeah.
You're not going to see a pole shift while we are here in the same frequency with the pole shift. There may be a shifting of the earth, but at the time that it happens, at least the vast majority of people will not be at the frequency that the shift happens on. There is a changing of energy frequency. And again, there's just such a complex, multi-layered series of proofs for that. And it is my understanding that these higher forces that are guiding each of our lives, every little synchronicity, is another notch that you can use in your belt to prove to you that there is something out there that loves you, that is guiding your life, that wants you to do well, that wants you to be happy, wants you to succeed. And that connection with your higher self will ensure that you don't end up in the concentration camp, that you don't end up being tortured. Because you listen to that guidance and you are steered by it.
The choices you make right now, I think, are very important. And I feel like one thing I sort of feel is going on right now is that people are making choices. You know, they're kind of determining almost like whether they're going to be able to hang with where human evolution is heading, which is going to have to be a kind of reintegration of this lost knowledge into our modern knowledge. It's you know, ancient wisdom and modern knowledge.
We have the rarest opportunity to, with our thoughts, hearts, and individual ideals, dawn a new age.
Our true consciousness does not exist in our brains or in our bodies. But this illusion of our individual bodies, along with the misinformation of our true origins, has manifested the idea that we all think independently from one another. With this misunderstanding, it would seem impossible to scientifically explain telepathy, clairvoyance, spiritual mediums, and other phenomena dealing with transferring information between sources without physical means of communication. But when you understand that there is a common spiritual bond between all things in the universe, and that we are all part of one divine intelligence, no phenomena is unexplainable. This simple understanding fills all the holes in modern religions. It explains reincarnation, déjà vu, predictions of the future, and literally every event, occurrence, or anomaly ever experienced. The blank matter within the most basic building blocks of perceivable existence is malleable and molded by intent. This means that consciousness shapes our reality. This seems difficult to accept for most, and it is quite understandable. In modern times, we are taught from an early age how to think rationally and tangibly. This is a very left-brain method of education, and it has more harmful effects than it's given credit for. The left brain deals with logic, details, facts, patterns, practicality, science, and math, as the right brain deals with feeling, intuition, symbols, images, risk-taking, philosophy, and religion. With a deliberate push for government-controlled educational curriculums, generation after generation of the youth are being taught to focus only on the facts, figures, and numbers. Repetition is used to train children subconsciously to accept what they're learning. Children aren't rewarded for questioning the validity of the information they receive. They are ridiculed. However, the children who blindly accept the information as true and merely regurgitate the information on command when it is time to take a test, those children go on to become the decision makers in our government, law, medicine, business, and every other occupation with power and prestige. The most detrimental effect of being pushed away from holistic thinking with the full brain into a strictly left brain thought is what is known as the suppression of the feminine. Every male and female have both feminine and masculine qualities. It has nothing to do with man or woman. These are represented by the left and right brain, yin and yang, black and white, light and dark, and most every other duality. Both are vital to our spiritual and physical health. In ancient Egypt, the female was the rightful heir to the throne. The male she chose to marry became pharaoh. This depicted the goddess tradition that has been destroyed to make way for a patriarchal, male-dominated society we see enforced in every major denomination. In suppressing the feminine of every society and pushing the people to strictly left-brain thinking, the natural ability for humanity to feel earthly, cosmic, and personal energy became lost. Traditions that were passed on through shamans, witch doctors, magicians, psychics, and seers of all kind became outlawed and ridiculed and given a stigma of something out of a Hollywood movie. Every religion explains that we are children of God and have godliness inside of us. If you erase the anthropomorphized God and understand that God is nothing more than the spiritual web that connects all things, all religious scriptures begin to make much more sense. Our bodies are merely vessels to contain our spirit, to gather experience for the divine mind. Those unprepared for this transition will likely not be able to cope with the rapid changes in the psyche. The only way to prepare for what is to come is what we have sought after for our entire lives: truth. Not the truth about governments, commerce, religions, terrorism, or anything external, but the truth within ourselves, within our psyche and our shadow self. Especially in Western cultures, we are taught that being normal means only being happy and never sad, only loving and never angry, only forgiving and never jealous. This sounds plausible, but it is not. We are not meant to repress any negative emotions because it causes imbalance. To conquer our emotions, we must embrace them, not fight them. We must acknowledge them and allow them to serve their purpose as we learn from them.
When you wake up in the morning, that breath, that brings your spirit into present time. Before you get out of bed, and if you do meditation or blessing or whatever, spend a couple of minutes intending your day. Just intention is a conscious action. We talked about action being the year of fire and action. Intention is a conscious action. So just close your eyes and review what you have coming up. And then create it in your mind, in your heart, in your feeling center, in your words, whatever is your avenue, because not everybody's a visionary, not everybody's a feeling person. Whatever comes your way naturally, how you want it to go. You know, intention is real, and people are fluid, and they are telepathic, and they are energetically receptive. If you walk in intending it to be a problem, well, guess what? You're very effective and very creative. If you walk in intending things to be difficult and that people aren't going to get you and you have to be defensive, that's a vibration, and that is a very toxic vibration that people feel immediately and will respond.
Our vibrations are increasing. There's no way to hold it back, but some will be left behind because they can't change quick enough. Don't get caught up in the illusion of what's happening.
So the Mayan time is actually cosmic time. They knew the actual nature of the time of the cosmos, of the galaxy, and so we're at this point here where like we're finishing this time of test, this time of trials, like the human beings have been having their final exam, and they're playing out all these
cramming.
Yeah, we got to do some cramming right
seems
now.
Like
read my books and you can cram. Okay,
right.
Read Time in the Technosphere and you can cram. The point is that now we're at this final testing point, and we got to till 2012. From 2004 till 2012 is 8 years, and so we have to begin to make the shift, because when we change the program, then we're being given the opportunity to change the program. It's like God is saying, okay, you have this one last chance to change your program, because that's the root of the problem. The reason why you haven't had peace yet is because you haven't understood you have to change the fundamental program. You're locked into a program of time that keeps your minds in a state of disharmony, that keeps you jagged, that keeps you accelerated, that keeps you in stress.
Then people say to me, I understand what you're saying here. What good does it do if I change and no one else around me changes? What good does it do if I remember compassion in my life, if I become compassion, if I remember no hate in a world that has learned to hate in the past, or if I remember no fear in a world that has learned to fear in the past? Well, to help understand what good that does, I have a short video clip that I'd like to show you. In the science of chaos theory, there is a mathematical equation that defines the point where order and chaos merge. It's a membrane where order and chaos come together. And until recently, it was a nebulous theoretical point. And with the advent of high-speed computers, now we're able to plug the mathematical formula into these computers and create an image, a picture of what this image actually looks like. We call the resulting image the Mandelbrot set. Your life is holographic in nature. I know that you know that, and I know you've heard that many times. I'd like to take a few moments and pausing in this video to explore precisely what that means to you, your life, and your relationships, your emotions, and your feelings. Every emotion, each feeling, each response that you choose to any given situation affects every other person on this earth to some degree. That's the beauty of the holographic model. That's the power in compassion. Together, let's explore the nature of this relationship through an image that researchers are calling the Mandelbrot set. What you're seeing on your screen right here, this is an image of a mathematical point that is called the Mandelbrot set. It is a point in chaos theory where order and chaos merge. And where they come together, that point may be defined mathematically. As we feed the mathematics into computers, this is the graphic equivalent of that boundary between order and chaos, the Mandelbrot set. Now, the reason I use this image to describe this concept is because this is a very good example of a hologram. One definition of a hologram may go something like this. In a hologram, the whole pattern is whole and complete unto itself, and if you were to take any little portion of this whole out and examine it closely, you will see the entire pattern repeating itself again and again and again. This is the way the Mandelbrot set works. This entire image is called the Mandelbrot set. And as you'll see around the periphery of the Mandelbrot set, you'll see many, many other little patterns. These are all little Mandelbrots. Now, we're going to use the power of our computer to take us into this image. We will zoom into the image, and you'll see that as we zoom into this image, the pattern repeats itself again and again and again. And this is where the beauty of the holographic model becomes apparent. Because it goes like this. Anywhere in this pattern, if we were to change one little aspect on any one of these little holograms, on any one of these little Mandelbrots, that change would be reflected throughout the entire system. every place where you saw this pattern would reflect that change, no matter where in the system we place the change. Our consciousness works that way. To the degree that you allow yourself to remember the gift of compassion, to remember the option of no hate and no fear in a world that has learned to hate and fear, to the degree that you allow that in your little piece of our universe, to some degree that change is reflected throughout the entire pattern of our universe, because we are holographic in nature. Well, let's explore this relationship together as through our computer we allow the computer to take us deeply into this model. There's our Mandelbrot set, and you can see that we are zooming into a complete portion, very specific portion of this set, and notice all along the periphery, all along the edges of the pattern, you see many, many, many Mandelbrot sets. As you listen to the music from this, it's almost a meditation as we move into this powerful pattern, the model that represents our consciousness. You see all the little Mandelbrot sets lining up side by side. Any change in any one of those sets would be reflected throughout the entire pattern, throughout the whole. There's something very interesting that will happen as we move farther and farther, deeper and deeper into the innermost regions of this pattern. And we see the pattern repeat itself over and over again. We're moving to an end point. And as we reach this end point, what you will see is that we end up with precisely the same pattern that we began with. Your relationships work in this manner. Your life works in this manner. The patterns are with you no matter where you go, no matter how far deeply into your life you move, or how far you attempt to remove yourself from the patterns of life. You are holographic in nature. No matter where you move to, what part of the world, what part of the country, no matter how many relationships you move into or out of, how many friendships you choose to initiate or complete, the patterns of your life remain the same because they are holographic in nature. And now you see, as we approach the end of the lifetime of this mathematical equation, this mathematical model, what we are completing with is precisely the same thing that we began with, the Mandelbrot set. No matter how deeply into this pattern we would move, if we were to begin once again now to look deeply into this pattern, we would see precisely the same thing happening again. We would see precisely these little Mandelbrot sets, one after another, again and again, reflecting in each of them, respectively, the pattern of the whole.
Many of these things that have been planned don't work out. And I do believe that we're like children in a sandbox, essentially. And there are beings of vastly higher intelligence and vastly higher ability that essentially make sure that we could foul up the nest if we want to, but outside of the nest, not much is going to happen. And even inside the nest, we live in a very highly structured reality. This is the most intrinsic thing to awaken to on the spiritual path, is so many people are living their lives thinking that it's just cause and effect on the most gross level of, like, if a human being does something, that's what happens, or if nature does something, that's what happens, but there's no other causality. And it's this magical awakening that happens when you start to see a connection between your thoughts and the manifestation that happens.
That's where this is all headed. That's where it has always been headed. These layers are building and building, and what they're building is heaven.
When you look at all of the things that have happened in your life that show you that there is more to life than this physical reality, there is such a positive, amazing force out there that wants you to believe that you are protected, that you are being guided, that you will be brought to the right place at the right time, you'll meet the right people, you'll hear the message.
You are chosen to come to this world, and you chose to come to this world. End of story. You are the divine system that a physical spiritual matter, person or being or consciousness can move through you and manifest into this rock in the middle of a solar system. And you're here because they decided, as they're unfolding from that dimension of reality into this dimension of reality, there's nobody better than you to be able to execute that particular precise moment, whether it be once or 1,000 times, than you. So the fact that there may be anybody else on the earth just like you is 1 in 16 billion. Well, there's only 6 billion, 300 or 400 million suckers here. So guess what? You the one.
You know, if we were to take a crystal glass here and we would start to put a higher vibration on that glass.
Yes, crack at some point.
Well, the first thing it does is it contracts.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
It tries to hold on to itself, and then it blows open.
I see.
And so what you're saying is an example of the contraction of 5 sensory people, because they know something's changing.
Right.
They can feel.
Dylan told them that about 20 folks.
Right, right. Something's going on here, and so they're trying to hold on to the old form.
Right.
And so 5 sensory people are really kind of in your face right now, and that's why shows like this are so important, because we're the higher vibration. And so when people are told the world's going to hell in a handbasket and it looks as bad as it's ever been, then what we need to say is that's only appearance. That's the contraction before we have this incredible breakthrough. And our job as light workers, our job as messengers of the new paradigm is to just keep our attention and focus and message on this higher vibration.
We have to have some kind of engaged political, social activism going on. But I guess I would say that can be most effective if we also at the same time have a sort of a spiritual practice going on in our own inner, in other words, that we're doing somehow, we're doing the centering work, we're doing the work on ourselves spiritually to remain balanced. And part of that, I think, is to refuse to be snowed by the fear-mongerers and the controllers and the deceivers. So we really have to work hard to keep our BS meters operating, to be able to discern the wheat from the chaff, and then at the same time to be practicing a spiritual centering. I think meditation is really a good thing. To practice even 15 minutes of meditation in the morning can really, I mean, if you keep it up over weeks and weeks and weeks, it can really transform one's effectiveness in your worldly pursuits. So in the domain of political activism, then, it can be that much more effective.
I do believe there is a reason for everything, and we have to actually ride this out, weather the storm, and understand there is a horizon on the other side. But unfortunately, humanity has picked this experience. It appears that way on every single level, and that we're in this cycle. To get through this cycle, this new world order, we actually have to have that belief that we're going to make it through. Once you let the hope get sucked from you, that is the beginning of the end for you on the individual level.
Okay. What we don't understand, and the science that has been kept from us, which, as you said, Richard Hoagland, for example, said that they, meaning the ruling elite, would rather lose an American city to a nuclear bomb than to give up the science of torsion fields. Because the science of torsion fields tells us just what I told you from St. Francis.
Right.
The power of a small group of people, 7,000 people meditating together, reduces global terrorism and fatalities and war and shooting each other by 75%. 3 out of 4 of those incidents don't happen.
Yep.
That means that 3 out of 4 people that would steal the food don't steal the food. That means that 3 out of 4 people who would die of malnutrition don't. So it's all about a frequency, and it sounds really preposterous, and that's why we have to break people into it slowly and get you step by step through the incremental process of realizing that the consciousness field itself is humanity.
And again, we don't want to narrow it down to 1 year.
No.
We're actually talking about a span of time under which we on the earth are undergoing a transformation and a possible heightening of consciousness everywhere. But at the same time, as consciousness expands and as people begin to grow, as you said, there are birth pains, all right?
Right.
A lot of people are going to be experiencing, breakups of relationships. Time is speeding up. Events are speeding up around them. I would also say that, opening your channel to your higher self is done through meditation more than anything else. And every person has that potential within their own body to open those channels and to get connected with their higher self and with God. So that's going to be the key in the coming days.
But for anyone for whom their intuition has worked for them reliably in the past, then listen to that voice, whether it's a real voice or a metaphorical voice. Because if you've got a very strong feeling that there's action you need to take, if you need to sell your stocks, if you need to, sell your house or take a loss on your house or move here or do that or not be with this person or whatever it is that you need, that you're hearing that you have to do, then do it, because you're probably right, and probably in these times more than any others, those messages that are coming to you, in whichever individual way those messages do come to you, they're likely to be coming through loud and clear. And
synchronicity, yeah.
What's probably the case is that everyone, each in their own way, is going to be getting this kind of information, and then it's our responsibility whether to pick it up, how to interpret it, whether to choose to act on it or not with our own free will. We have that capacity, and if we're not confident in having that capacity, then there are ways to learn, and it starts now.
These are hertz, frequencies, or cycles per second that the musicians can retune their instruments to play and experiment with. Why? Again, these are the Creator's musical scale, the original solfeggio, buried for 3,000 years in the Bible. So the ancient priests who knew how to levitate the huge stones for the building of the pyramids, and the Masonic knowledge that predated ancient Egypt, the ability to have this information, these frequencies, serve the function of creation, destruction, and miracles on behalf of the empowered people who had access to this knowledge. I say that because of this metaphor. This is the difference between the power of our Creator and anything else, particularly evil. That you can go into a pitch black room full of evil, full of darkness, and light a little candle, and instantly that darkness flees. But you can't do the opposite. You can't go into a well-lit room full of truth and wisdom and righteousness and joy and health and harmony with the universal power. You can't take any amount of darkness and go into that well-lit room and have any effect whatsoever. That is the metaphor which I frequently think of when I think that I'm not empowered. It is the greatest lesson for me, and I think for everybody else, to know that we're on the winning side and that we win in the end.
You get a real chance to make the difference that this time between now and 2012, 13, and 14, this time that's on us, it will be here in less than 5 years. It started in 2004. It'll go to 2012 or 13. And it will be the opportunity to open up your consciousness.
But the fact is, everything all exists all at the same time. And that is going to be more and more revealed as we go forward. With no limit on time. Well, by the way, I didn't bring this up earlier, but we're also doing time travel. I don't know if you guys have heard anything about it. But they have found a way to slow and even stop light. And as you slow light, it gathers more mass. And as it gathers more mass, it actually alters the time of elements. So we have now altered the spin of electrons by slowing light. And we have time-traveled electrons. Not objects yet, not animals yet, but electrons. We've already done it. It's just a matter of very little time before we start to be able to alter time.
I'll share with you a story. Researchers recently related in one of the Nature magazines. This is a very beautiful and very touching story, the story of geese. I know some of you probably have read or heard of this story. Researchers have determined that geese, as they fly together, are very closely tuned to one another as they fly in their flock, for example. That the geese, by flying together in a formation, that they add over 71% greater distance in moving together toward a common goal than if each of those geese were to move separately and independently on their own. We probably have something that we can learn from that. The researchers determined that the geese, as the lead goose, as the head goose would move forward in his flock, and as he would become tired of his own volition, of his own choice, he would drop and fall behind and allow someone else to take the lead and lead the whole toward their greater goal. And perhaps for me, the most beautiful portion of this story is that researchers determined through their experience and through their observation that any time within a flock that any one goose is injured from a hunter's bullet or from illness and chooses to fall out of the formation, always, 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 that goose is always accompanied by at least 2 others who will follow him to the ground and will stay with him until he either recovers from his injuries or dies. And if he recovers from the injuries, together the 3 will follow from one flock to another and another until they reach their original flock. And if he dies, then the one that is left behind will be left, and the other 2 will catch up with that original flock. The beauty of that story, and the metaphor for me, is I believe we are essentially living as a flock moving toward a common goal. My choice is that no one gets left behind. Everyone learns at a different level. Everyone understands and accelerates at a different pace, and we're all moving toward the same place. We're all part of this process.
Our ability to perceive the world around us is going to expand. By no choice, by no studying, by no getting ready, your ability as a spiritual being is going to go from here, which is what we most see, to about here. You're going to see things on the side of you. You're going to see movements. You're going to see energy in between you and the person that you're talking to. You're going to perceive thoughts. You're going to see beings that you thought were dead being able to get closer to you and to have conversations with you, because as this compression of time comes, because the damn universe is moving, reality expands.
You can have information that you would know is real. You read these things, you ask questions, make up your own mind. Don't believe what everybody is telling you. Think for yourself. Don't let fear rule your life, because if you're afraid, if fear is holding you back, you're not going to progress as we go into the new earth. And it's happening. Our vibrations are increasing. There's no way to hold it back. But some will be left behind because they can't change quick enough. Don't get caught up in the illusion of what's happening. I always tell people when I do a lecture, don't believe what I say. Don't believe what anybody else says. Think for yourself. Ask lots and lots of questions. Then make up your own mind what it is you believe. Your truth may not be my truth, but it is yours. What you believe is the most important thing.
Don't be followers, be students. Don't listen to anything that anybody says, including what we're saying now. You know, be your own authority. Learn to trust your own.
Take what
information,
resonates
your own
with you.
judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
And throw out the rest.
Listen to your heart more than anything else. I mean, it's really your intelligence blended with your heart, and there is an intelligence there that will really be able to interpret what's going on with you. And resonance is like, you know, the perfect word. That's if something resonates with you, there's a reason. You need to listen to find out what that reason might be.
And you reminded me of something that I was going to say before and I lost the track of it, which is everybody sends me these emails and they're saying, what should I do? Mm-hmm. And they're so concerned about, they want to do the right spiritual thing. They want to make the right decision. Should I go here or should I go there? Because one of them is the right one and one of them is the wrong one. Should I stay with my partner or should I leave my partner? Because one of them is the right one and one of them is the wrong one. And that's actually not how it works.
Correct.
My understanding of the spiritual path is that the most important thing you can do is make a decision.
Yes.
Not that one is right and the other one is wrong, but that you go through a process of analyzing your opportunities in one direction or the other based on what you think is going to happen and make an informed choice about what you want to do. Most important is get authentic, get honest with yourself. Go into the gratitude and live that life of the promise of abundance, and it will start to flow for you. That's truism that cannot be denied.
We live in the greatest opportunity to be the holiest, most divine, and caring spiritual beings. That energy is going to come through crisis, through innovation, through technology, but that opportunity is what's coming. And when you look at it like that, and you understand that there are so many things and principles that you are capable of using now that you haven't been able to use in any of your last lifetimes that didn't happen 26,000 years ago. You'd have to go back 26,000 years, or how many times you've been here or lived or whatever it was, to have the same opportunity as you have right now. And you can't afford to miss it.
And I guarantee you, your view of life and who you are and where you are and where you're going will never be the same.
Life is about making choices. The best choices are made after fully researching an issue and making a sound and responsible decision based on fact and sensibility, not hysteria. Read the actual Mayan prophecies. You can view them on my 2012 website. Study the cosmos, the photon belt, the lineage of mankind. Research other cultures with a 2012 end date or correlation, such as the Aztec sunstone, the Hindus' Kali Yuga, the Egyptians' sun chart, and China's I Ching. You can find this information categorized on my 2012 forum, or you can research the information on the internet. Before jumping to conclusions about 2012, it's better to have an educated opinion of what to expect versus living the next few years in fear. The Mayan calendar essentially boils down to the removing of the ego, practicing unconditional love for one another, getting back in tune with the natural harmonic time frequencies, and trying to make this world a better place. Perhaps nothing will happen on December 21st, 2012, but even if nothing happens, something has already happened. Millions of people have helped to make this world a better place, and that alone is a positive change for all of us.